What if the man you vowed to love forever was already planning your funeral? It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. But something was wrong. So deeply, viscerally wrong no one could name it, but they all felt it. The cake was untouched. The bride's mother kept wiping at invisible sweat. And the photographer, halfway through snapping what should have been forever memories, whispered to his assistant, "Does anyone else smell that?" It was faint, metallic, like blood and burnt roses. Nobody saw the signs. Not clearly. Not until she was already gone. And by then, her husband was smiling in the pictures, but she wasn't in any of them. They called her Mariella Quinn, 26, vibrant, soft-spoken, too gentle for the world she was thrown into. She met Kellen Mercer 7 months ago at a bookstore downtown. He held the door open for her. Smiled like he'd waited forever. He told her she had eyes like forgotten summers. She told her sister later, "He makes me feel like I've finally stopped running." But she was running. From something nobody knew. Not even him. Or maybe, especially him. At the reception, Kellen gave a toast. His voice was calm, almost distant. "To the woman who saved me from myself." Some people clapped. A few stared. Because he didn't touch her hand. Didn't look her in the eyes. Didn't even say her name. And Mariella? She just smiled. Tight. Like something in her jaw was locked. When her best friend, Alana, hugged her goodbye that night, Mariella leaned in and whispered something odd. "I think I made a mistake." No one ever saw her alive again. That night, neighbors said they heard a crash, around 3:17 a.m. Like glass breaking, then silence. A full hour later, Kellen made a phone call. Not to the police. Not to her family. To a florist. He ordered black dahlias. Said they were for a memorial. The next morning, Mariella's body was found in their hotel suite. Still in her dress. The zipper torn open. The ring still on her finger. Her face. They said it didn't even look like her anymore. Police asked Kellen what happened. He stared for too long, then said, "She slipped." On what? He didn't answer. When the coroner released the report, it revealed something else entirely. There were marks around her neck. Shaped like hands. And on the mirror, in faint lipstick, one final message. "Check the vows." They did. And buried in the poetic promises Kellen had written for her, were lines from an obscure 1973 psychiatric journal. Lines used to manipulate patients into suggestibility, submission, control. Why would he do that? What did she know? And what did he mean by a memorial, before she was even declared dead? What if the person you trusted with your heart was the only one who ever truly wanted it to stop beating? They buried Mariella in a dress she didn't pick, under a name she never wanted to share. Mariella Quinn Mercer. But the hyphen felt like a wound. Her friends whispered during the service. Some cried quietly. Others kept looking at the front pew where Kellen sat perfectly still, hands folded, jaw clenched. Not a single tear. Not even when her sister read the eulogy. Not even when the priest said, "A marriage that ended far too soon." Kellen just blinked. What? Slowly. Then he left before the last hymn. The investigation hadn't ruled it homicide. Not officially. The bruising around her neck was inconclusive. No weapon was found. No witnesses. No signs of forced entry or obvious struggle. Just a toppled vase. A broken lamp. Her body cold and oddly composed. But 2 weeks after the funeral, Mariella's childhood friend Claire Monroe came forward with something that would change everything. A locked journal. Wrapped in silk. Hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Jane Eyre. Found in a box labeled, "Do not read until I'm gone." The first entry was dated March 3rd, 5 months before the wedding. "I love him. But something is off. There's a shadow behind his smile. Like he's watching me even when he's looking away. Last night I woke up at 3:17 a.m. He was sitting on the edge of the bed. Whispering something. I couldn't understand the words. I pretended to stay asleep. This morning he made me tea. I didn't drink it. I think he's testing me." Claire said Mariella had always been anxious. Quiet. But this was different. There was a growing dread in her words, something primal. Not just fear of heartbreak. Fear of disappearance. "I dreamed I was buried alive in a white dress." I asked him about his past. He said he doesn't remember his childhood. But I found a photo in his drawer. It was burned around the edges. 3 people. One was definitely Kellen. The other 2, their eyes were scratched out. I googled the address on the back of the photo. It doesn't exist. Claire hadn't known what to do with the journal. She said she felt ashamed, like opening it would betray Mariella. Like reading her fears meant validating them. But now, knowing how she died, every line read like a prophecy. Especially one entry. If anything happens to me, check the vows. And check the lake house. The lake house. Nobody knew about it, except Mariella and Kellen. Detectives requested access to the property. It was in Kellen's name. A remote, decaying cottage near the state line, surrounded by woods thick enough to swallow sound. Inside, they found the walls covered in wedding photos. Mariella's face had been scribbled out in red pen, over and over again. In the kitchen there was a corkboard filled with timelines. Days marked with excess. One date circled in black ink. July 9th, Unity. It was the day after the wedding. And next to it, a single note in Kellen's handwriting. Only through death can you truly belong to someone. But the real horror? Was found in the basement. An old cassette player. Playing a loop tape of vows, Kellen's voice distorted, whispering the same lines again and again. She is mine. Even in silence. Even in soil. And a suitcase in the corner. It belonged to Mariella. Unopened. Still packed. She hadn't even unpacked after the ceremony. Because deep down, maybe she knew she wouldn't need to. Investigators reopened the case. Kellen was brought in for questioning again. He didn't speak. Not until they played him her voice, reading her own diary aloud, recorded just a week before the wedding. If I die, it won't be an accident. He's charming. That's how he traps you. But I see the cage now. And I'm running out of time. Kellen blinked again. Then smiled. And said, she always had such a beautiful imagination. What did he mean by unity? Why was her face defaced in every photo? And more importantly, how did Mariella know exactly what time she would wake up in fear? What if the perfect man had done it all before, and no one lived to tell their story until now? When the police dug deeper into Kellen Mercer's past, something became immediately clear. There wasn't much to find. No childhood photos. No school records before age 14. No birth certificate until the adoption in 2003. Kellen had always told Mariella he was a private person. Claimed his parents died in a car crash when he was young. Said he bounced between foster homes until college. But investigators found something else. A detail buried in public archives, not under Kellen's name, but another. Thomas Levi Garland. Same birthday. Same crooked scar on the collarbone. Same ice-cold eyes in a forgotten juvenile mugshot. And the location? A town called Elmridge Hollow, now a ghost town swallowed by forest. And in the middle of that forgotten place stood one house. Faded, sunken, wrapped in thorny vines. Kellen's real childhood home. Detectives secured a warrant and entered what remained of the Mercer, or Garland, estate. Inside, everything was covered in plastic sheeting. But underneath the dust, on the cracked wooden walls, they found them. Photographs. Rows of them. Taped edge to edge like wallpaper. Young girls. In dresses. Holding flowers. Smiling, but only with their mouths. Their eyes looked afraid. And one corner of each picture had a number. Not a name. A number. Like a sequence. A pattern. Mariella had been number 12. In a mold-stained shoebox near the fireplace, they discovered a brittle, yellowed composition book titled, Mother's Rules for Love and Obedience. Handwritten by Eleanor Garland. Inside, dozens of rituals. Instructions. Punishments. The rules weren't just disturbing. They were ritualistic. A bride must not scream. Screaming is betrayal. You must take her hand at midnight. Not a second before. If she tries to leave, you must complete the binding in blood. One bride once a year. Until your soul is no longer lonely. Eleanor Garland died in 2007. But her words lived in Kellen's vows. Nearly every line he spoke to Mariella on their wedding day had been taken, verbatim, from this book. Police couldn't identify the girls in the photos. Their faces didn't match any known missing persons cases. There were no bodies found. But in the back of the house, in a slanted tool shed, they did find something else. 12 small stones arranged in a circle. Each one marked with a number, carved in childlike handwriting. Surrounded by blackened flower petals, old hair ties, rusted rings, fragments of lace. It wasn't a tool shed. It was a shrine. The horror deepened when investigators cross-checked rental cabin records from surrounding towns over the last decade. Kellen had used aliases. Lots of them. Always booked in summer. Always checked out after exactly one night. And always ordered the same thing the next morning. Black dahlias. The flower of betrayal. The flower found next to Mariella's body. He had done this before. And they missed it. But Mariella wasn't like the others. According to her journal, she felt it coming. She noticed patterns, wrote down dates, left clues. She resisted. In one passage dated a week before her death, she wrote, "He talks in his sleep. Says things like, 'Mother said not to waste this one.' He grips my wrist in the dark, but when I pull away, he smiles in the morning like nothing happened. Last night I tried to call Alana. He cut the phone lines. Said storms were coming. I think this is how he does it. He isolates them, confuses them, makes them feel crazy, then marries them. Then." That page was torn. At the lake house, new forensic scans revealed blood traces underneath a layer of fresh paint in the bathroom. Not just Mariella's. At least 2 unidentified female DNA profiles were found in the cracks between the tile. They'd been there for years, hidden beneath bleach, perfume, and silence. And no one had ever come looking. Until now. Kellen was brought in for formal questioning again. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He simply said, "Mother taught me everything I know. But Mariella, she didn't follow the rules." When asked what rules he meant, he leaned forward and whispered, "The bride must stay still." Then he laughed. So who were the 11 before Mariella? Where were their bodies? And what did Kellen mean by complete the binding in blood? What if one of the so-called dead brides didn't die, but instead lived with a truth too horrifying to speak? Until now. 11 stones. 11 photographs. 11 missing names. Until one blinked into the light. Her name was Juniper Cross. And she had been dead for 14 years. Or so everyone thought. Juniper came forward after watching the news story about Mariella Quinn's accidental death. It was the image of the lipstick message, "Check the vows," that made her stop breathing. She had written the same thing. Only hers had been on a fogged bathroom mirror in 2011, inside a cabin she never told anyone she visited. She never expected anyone would believe her. She was 17, homeless, alone, and desperate. She said she met him under a different name, Landon. He told me he wanted to help me get off the streets, that I deserved safety. He gave me a sandwich and a warm blanket, took me to a cottage in the woods, said it was his family's summer home, that I could stay one night and decide in the morning. She never remembered agreeing to go, but she woke up there. The door was locked, the windows nailed shut from the outside. She wasn't allowed to leave, not until the ceremony. There was a dress laid out on the bed, pale blue. It wasn't new. The lace was yellowed. It smelled like lavender and blood. He brought me tea every morning. And every night he'd kneel beside the bed and whisper things. I couldn't understand at first. But then I realized they were vows. Not promises. Chants. Juniper said he made her stand in a circle of flower petals, blackened, rotting, and recite lines he wrote. Each time she got one wrong, he'd tighten a cord around her wrist. Not violently. Just enough to remind her she was his. The escape came not through luck, but horror. One night she pretended to sleep. He came in speaking to a photo on the wall. Of a woman. Stern. Eyes like ice. "I did everything you asked, Mother." But she won't listen. She keeps asking questions. Maybe she's not the one. Or maybe I'll have to make her understand. That was the moment Juniper knew. She wouldn't leave alive. So she did the unthinkable. She broke a mirror and cut herself. Not deep enough to die, but enough to convince him she might. He panicked. I think he wasn't allowed to spill blood before the ritual. He screamed, "No, no, no, not yet," and left the room to get towels. I climbed out the second-story window using a rotting sheet. I ran barefoot through the woods until I hit a road. The first car that stopped? I told them I was running from a cult. They didn't believe me. No one did. I never told the police his name. I didn't even know it. But I know that smell. Black dahlias. And old lace. And death. Juniper Cross became the missing girl no one reported missing. Until Mariella gave her voice back. Her story filled in the final blanks investigators needed to legally charge Kellen Mercer with first-degree murder, false imprisonment, and suspected serial homicide. But they still hadn't found proof of the other victims. Until Juniper led them there. The place wasn't in the woods. It was under them. Beneath the Mercer estate, Elmridge Hollow's last standing home, there was a sealed crawlspace. Rotting boards nailed in ritualistic patterns. Inside, 6 small boxes. Each one filled with bones, hair, tattered dresses. And notes. Written in different handwriting. Different years. Different voices begging for help. But one box was empty. Just a folded piece of paper inside. Mariella's handwriting. I broke the cycle. Don't let him find another. Kellen was arrested without resistance. But when asked why he did it, he only said, "Because love is eternal," and smiled. But Juniper said something else. Something worse. When I escaped, I heard him whisper to the photo again. "You were right, mother. One always gets away. To tell the story. That's how the ritual completes. And I've wondered every day since, if he let me live on purpose." So did Juniper escape, or was she meant to carry the tale? Was she a survivor, or part of a ritual far older than any of us can understand? And what was the meaning of the empty box with Mariella's name? What if the person who raised a killer had once been the victim of something far older, far darker, and passed it on in silence, smile by smile, vow by vow? By the time authorities arrested Kellen Mercer, the media had already descended into a frenzy of horror headlines. The wedding ritual killer. He married her, then buried her. Mother said love means never letting go. But buried beneath the chilling details of Mariella Quinn's final day, and Juniper Cross's daring escape, was the one name that had remained quietly burning at the heart of every page, every whisper. Eleanor Garland. Kellen's mother. Or as he called her, Mother. But who was Eleanor? And how did she become the woman who raised a son to believe that love ends in death? Eleanor Garland died in 2007. Officially, it was ruled a suicide. She'd taken a kitchen knife to her own throat, while seated at her dining table, one hand still holding a black velvet ribbon, the other gripping a wedding invitation. But it wasn't hers. It was someone else's, a woman who had gone missing 2 weeks earlier. Her name was Celeste Mayweather. Age 29. Disappeared after a date with a man she'd met online. A man she only ever referred to in her journal as the Silver Boy. Celeste's body was never found. The invitation didn't have a date, just one word written in cursive across the inside. Unity. Sound familiar? That same word was found circled on Kellen's cabin calendar, dated the day after his wedding to Mariella. But Eleanor had been dead for 16 years. So what did she know? And what did she leave behind? Investigators revisited Elmridge Hollow, this time focusing on the attic which had previously been locked with rusted iron latches. They pried it open, expecting mold, dust, rodents. They found a library. Every book had the same theme: devotion, obedience, ritual marriage, obscure pre-Christian folklore texts about binding souls through sacrifice, and one small black journal with gold lettering etched by hand. The Brides of Daughters Mercy, Eleanor, 1974. That name, Daughters Mercy, didn't turn up in official religious registries. But it existed. Hidden in the footnotes of a 1980 cult investigation into female-led spiritual sects in rural Oregon and the northern Appalachian region. Daughters Mercy was believed to have operated in silence from the late 1960s to the early 1980s. Their teachings? A woman's pain brings forth the purest love. A bride without struggle is a bride without soul. One must be chosen. One must bear witness. One must carry the vow. Witnesses, said the group, married girls as young as 15 to older male vessels, promising eternal spiritual connection, often under the pretense of ritualized death and rebirth. The sect disbanded after several suspected disappearances, but no one was ever charged. Why? Because most of the members were never found. In her journal, Eleanor described her initiation. He wasn't a man. He was a messenger. I wore the veil. I bled into the soil. I woke up changed. And I was promised a child who would bring the union. Thomas was born with his eyes open. He did not cry. He just watched me, as if waiting for permission. I raised him to listen, to never lie, to obey the vow. When the 12th comes, the cycle is complete. No more brides. Just one left to carry the seed forward. The 12th. Mariella. Police now believed Kellen, formerly Thomas, had been conditioned from birth to complete a cycle his mother never could. A cycle Eleanor believed would grant them both transcendence. Kellen's childhood wasn't just strange, it was curated, orchestrated, like a stage set for one repeating play. Find the bride. Make her love you. Marry her. Take her. Bury her. Repeat. But Eleanor didn't leave behind just books and memories. Hidden beneath a floorboard in the attic, officers discovered a small wooden box. Inside were locks of hair, withered petals, and a list of dates, each correlating to the approximate time of a woman's disappearance near towns Kellen had visited under fake names. Next to each date, a carved line. Like tally marks. There were 11. And a final mark, not carved, but half-etched. Incomplete. Investigators believe Eleanor never lived to witness the 12th. But her son finished it for her. Even now, experts argue over how much Kellen actually believed in the daughter's mercy doctrine. Was he delusional, brainwashed, or simply evil? His private therapy records, obtained through subpoena, suggested something even more disturbing. Kellen told a psychiatrist months before meeting Mariella, "I dream of her, the 12th. She's always running. But I never chase her. Because I know she'll stop. And when she turns around she smiles, and says, 'I understand now.'" But Mariella didn't stop. She turned. She wrote. She fought. And because of her, the cycle was finally broken. Or was it? Because the final page of Eleanor's journal didn't end with a vow. It ended with a question. If one always escapes, does that not mean the ritual continues? Was Eleanor truly dead? Or did she leave something behind even more dangerous? An idea, a prophecy, a seed that Kellen planted in another mind? And what happened to the cult members who were never found? What if the horror didn't die with him? What if someone out there is still waiting for the circle to begin again? When authorities uncovered Eleanor Garland's journal, etched with ritual instructions, cycle counts, and coded blessings from the Daughter's Mercy sect, they believed they were unraveling the final chapter in a long-forgotten horror. But they were wrong. The ritual may have ended for Kellen Mercer. But Daughter's Mercy? It was never just about one man. It was about continuance. 1978, Camber Pines, West Virginia. Local reports filed under religious activity documented strange sightings near the abandoned convent of St. Elias the Silent, long shuttered after a fire in 1959. Multiple witnesses claimed they saw women dressed in veils, walking barefoot in procession around the ruins, chanting in low rhythmic Latin. When approached they scattered. But the symbol etched into the ground, a circle of 12 petals with a broken 13th at the center, was unmistakably identical to those drawn in Eleanor's attic journal. One officer, now retired, made a chilling note in his report. "One of them looked right at me. Her eyes were milky white. She whispered, 'She is the key. The final one must open the door.'" The report was dismissed as stress-induced paranoia. Until now. Daughter's Mercy was never officially tied to any one geographic location. Instead, their presence was traced through whispers. Fires in the woods after women went missing. Towns that refused to speak about local legends. Hotels that reported guests checking in under one name and vanishing the next morning. But there were survivors. Some found too late. Some too afraid to speak. And some who spoke only through what they left behind. One such survivor was Mina Holbrook, age 64. She lived alone in a farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania. In 1982 she had been reported missing for 6 weeks, only to reappear thin and terrified with no explanation. When interviewed again in 2024, after Mariella Quinn's murder and Kellen's arrest, she agreed to speak under one condition. No cameras. No recordings. Only notes. Mina's account, as told to investigators. "They took me in when I was 16. Told me I was chosen. They said love was the fire that purifies. They starved me until I agreed to wear the veil. They made me memorize a chant. 'She who obeys is not alone. She who loves is not afraid.' We weren't allowed to speak unless spoken to. Every Sunday we had to stand in the circle. One of us was always in the center. They called her the 13th. No one wanted to be the 13th. She was the final bride. The one who bore the truth. The one who would carry the voice of mother beyond the cycle. One girl ran. She didn't get far. They said she wasn't worthy. The rest of us just prayed not to be chosen. Mina managed to escape one rainy night. She was caught, punished, then released. Why? Because according to her, mother said the 13th must come willingly, or the circle shatters. Investigators didn't believe Mina, at first, until she handed over a worn book from the convent's ruins, wrapped in a decaying veil. Inside were 13 names, only 12 of them crossed out. The last one? Blank. Waiting. Underneath it a phrase. "She will be the one who walks alone, but carries them all." Mina pointed to it and said, "It was never about sacrifice. It was about continuation. We weren't meant to die. We were meant to deliver. The final bride, she's not the victim. She's the door." Then Mina said something else. Something that froze the room. "You think Mariella was the end? She was the signal. The 13th hasn't come yet. But she will. And when she does, it won't be a wedding. It'll be a reunion." What followed was stranger still. 2 weeks after her interview, Mina Holbrook disappeared. Her farmhouse was found abandoned. Her front door wide open. No signs of struggle. But in the center of her bedroom floor, a circle was burned into the wood. 12 blackened petals. And the 13th? Unmarked. So who is the final bride? Who is the 13th? Was it Mariella, or is she simply the voice that awakened the final part of the ritual? And if the daughter's mercy still exists, what have they been preparing for? What if it wasn't about blood or power or control, but devotion? What if someone wanted to become the last bride, and open the door they were all too afraid to touch? For decades, the daughter's mercy cult existed only as a faded echo in scattered police reports, diary entries and whispered memories. Until Mariella Quinn's death shattered the silence. Until Kellen Mercer's arrest ripped open the veil. And until a woman named Naomi Wren vanished, seemingly into thin air. 1 week ago, Tuesday, 11:03 p.m. Naomi, 28 years old, had just moved into a remote rental property 3 towns from Elmridge Hollow, the now infamous site of Eleanor Garland's home and Kellen's twisted upbringing. She had no prior connection to the case. No known relationship to Mariella. No family ties to anyone involved. She was, by all accounts, a quiet librarian from Delaware. But her landlord reported something strange the morning after her disappearance. The place smelled like burnt roses. The windows were open. And in the center of the floor, there were 13 white candles. Still warm. She left behind no packed bags, no diary, no signs of a struggle. But on her bed, a black veil. And a note. I understand now. Investigators searched her browser history. They found something deeply unsettling. Naomi had been obsessively following the case. She read every article, watched every video. And weeks before her disappearance, she searched. How to find daughter's mercy. Where is Elmridge Hollow? What happens after the 12th? Then, how to complete the circle. They checked her phone. Most of the texts were normal. But one stood out, sent to herself in a saved draft. Never sent. It's not about dying. It's about becoming. She wasn't afraid in the end. Neither am I. The handwriting on the note beside the veil matched Naomi's. She hadn't been taken. She'd gone willingly. Police traced her last known location to an old chapel near the ruins of St. Elias, the same place where veiled figures had been seen decades earlier. They found her car parked outside. Inside, a single white dahlia. And a cassette tape labeled simply, Vows. When investigators played the tape, they expected a message. A goodbye. A scream. What they heard was this. Mother said the final bride walks without fear. The others were flowers. I am the root. The soil is ready. I hear them calling from beneath. This is not the end. This is the unbreaking. On the 3rd day of the search, a local farmer discovered freshly turned soil in a clearing. It was a circle. 13 feet wide. Exactly. At the center. Naomi's clothing. Folded neatly. Clean. Dry. No body. Just a single carved symbol in the dirt, matching the one from Eleanor's journal. A petal curling inward. A door opening in reverse. Experts say cult behavior often spirals into imitation. Copycats. Fanatics. People seeking meaning through someone else's horror. But this didn't feel like imitation. It felt prepared. Like Naomi had been waiting. Not to die, but to join. And here's what's even more disturbing. A week before Mariella Quinn's murder, Naomi wrote a poem on an anonymous forum. It went unnoticed until recently. I dreamed I was the 13th. The bride without a face. I held a candle to the wind. And it did not blow out. They called me the opening. They called me the gate. And when I said, I do, the earth answered back. All across the country, reports are trickling in. Candles lit in circles. Black veils found in woods. Girls disappearing after Googling, the Mercy Bride. Is it hysteria? Or has a seed truly been planted? What we know. Eleanor believed the 13th would walk willingly. Mariella resisted, and disrupted the cycle. Juniper Cross escaped, but may have been allowed to. Naomi Wren? She sought it. She wanted to be the door. And maybe she was. Because 2 days ago, a message was sent from Naomi's phone. No location. No context. Just 2 words. She's coming. So here we are. At the end. Or maybe the beginning. 12 brides. 1 broken circle. And a final soul who wanted to complete it. Maybe the ritual wasn't just about killing. Maybe it was a summoning. Maybe Kellen was just the echo. And Naomi, the voice. Do you believe in the Mercy Bride? Do you think Naomi is alive, transformed, or part of something darker now? Let us know in the comments. And whatever you do, don't say, I do alone. Bell subscribe for more terrifying stories, and be careful who you vow to love. Because some weddings don't end with, "till death do us part." They begin there. And something always answers from beneath. If you want more chilling true crime stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the Veil of Secrets.